Who do you think is the most difficult person to work with in film history? Unless you answered Klaus Kinski, you're wrong. It's 1971 and a sweltering heat falls over Peru. The jungle surrounding the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu is filled with snakes, mosquitoes, spiders, and this particular summer, an intrepid film crew. Led by director Werner Herzog, this is the production of Aguirre, The Wrath of God. Lead actor Klaus Kinski has been screaming non-stop, taking every inconvenience and mild annoyance as a personal insult. Angry with the director, the cast, and the crew, one night he slips into a massive rage. Picking up a rifle he brought with him, he walks towards a tent. He claims he brought the Winchester for protection from the jungle's dangers. But tonight, he has a different use in mind. Inside a modest tent is a group of extras who play Spanish conquistadors in the film. They were relaxing after a hard day of shooting by playing cards and drinking. Kinski had become irate over this unsanctioned joy, so he raised his gun. He then fired 3 times into a tent filled with 45 men. One man was struck in the hand, losing the tip of his middle finger. Even after this incident, Werner Herzog would go on to make 4 more movies starring Kinski. The German actor was featured in well over 100 films and made shooting almost all of them a nightmare for the directors. Kinski was such a difficult and irate figure in these productions that his life was almost routinely threatened. At multiple points in his career, various people made semi-serious plans to bump the actor off. But who was Kinski, and why was he the way that he was? A closer look at his life helps explain his legendary temper. Kinski was born in Poland in 1926 and was raised in Berlin for much of his youth. Most of the tales of his early life come from his memoir, All I Need Is Love, but it's hard to decipher fact from fiction. In his documentary, My Best Fiend, Herzog claimed that Kinski simply fabricated much of the book, including his supposed struggles with poverty. It is known that at the height of World War II, and despite being Polish-born, the 17-year-old Kinski was drafted into the German army. Fortunately for everyone, he wasn't a very good soldier. According to Kinski himself, and again, take this with a grain of salt, he quickly attempted to desert, only to be shot and captured by British troops. It was during this time that he discovered his love of acting. In the POW camp where Kinski spent the rest of the war, the prisoners staged several theatrical productions, and young Klaus caught the acting bug. After the war, he followed this new career path, which had him performing in shows and plays across Germany. However, his career hit self-imposed stumble after stumble. He was hired by a prestigious German theater group in 1948, only to be fired less than a year later for his vulgar and insane behavior. He eventually was forced to perform in one-man shows, delivering monologues to small audiences. As a result, he was left with little money and no place to stay. This is how his path crossed with the filmmaker who would define his career.
I've dwelt among the humans. Their entire culture is built around their penises.
While Werner Herzog may be more known these days for his acting roles in The Mandalorian or Rick and Morty, he's also one of the most important filmmakers to ever exist. The director has made some of the most celebrated films of all time, from documentaries about man and nature to remakes of Nosferatu and Bad Lieutenant. However, he hadn't accomplished any of that when he first met Kinski. According to Herzog himself, he was only 13 years old when the pair met. Herzog was living with his family in a single room at a boarding house when Kinski moved into another room. Herzog remembers Kinski ranting and raving constantly. He once locked himself in a bathroom for 49 hours straight, destroying every bit of furniture around him. He would cause property destruction on a routine basis, and he was a nightmare to live around. Herzog didn't know it yet, but he had just met his best friend. In his documentary about his relationship with Kinski, Herzog toured the old apartment. He remembered that between his many tirades, Kinski would also tirelessly practice his craft. He would stay alone in his room, endlessly reciting monologues and scenes back to himself. Herzog claimed that Kinski would hide this work from his own life story because he preferred to cultivate the myth that he was fueled by pure talent. He would often claim that he was born with this skill, as if his acting chops were divinely granted. Herzog knew the truth and respected Kinski more for his work ethic. Before their paths would meet again, Kinski's film career had begun to take off. He acted in multiple movies from 1948 to the early 1960s. By far his biggest pre-Herzog role was in the 1965 film Dr. Zhivago. It was also during this time that he started to gain a reputation as a difficult man to work with. Kinski became known for dropping contracts and quitting productions midway through. He also abandoned theatrical productions that he had produced while they were in the middle of national tours. His mood was known to swing wildly. He would often attack the men and women he worked with for the smallest slights. Still, there was something magnetic about his performances, so much so that he continued to sell out shows and land roles. Oftentimes, audiences would pay just to see him rant and rave on stage for hours at a time. Herzog and Kinski met again in 1971, when the filmmaker began production on Aguirre, The Wrath of God. Herzog had a few films under his belt by the time work started on Aguirre. However, this was his most ambitious project by far. Filming on location in the Amazon rainforest with a large native cast and crew, this was a massive undertaking even by today's standards. Herzog was doing it on 35mm film with a budget of just over $300,000. Herzog cast Kinski in the lead, and his old neighbor didn't make things any easier. The film's plot followed a group of Spanish conquistadors traversing the Amazon River on rickety rafts in search of El Dorado. They experience pain, death, insanity, revolt, and finally annihilation. So a fun family adventure film. Watch it with grandma. When they arrived in Peru to begin filming, Kinski showed up with cases full of snow and mountain climbing equipment. He had refused to believe that a snowbound scene had been cut, and had dragged the unnecessary accessories with him. He also complained non-stop about everything. He hated staying in the jungle, ranting about bugs, heat, dirt, and the locals. He also hated everyone involved in the production. One extra remembers how Kinski assaulted him during filming. In one scene, the conquistadors were attacking a native village. During this sequence, some of the Spanish troops raid the villagers' food. Kinski's titular character was supposed to break this up, but Kinski took it too far. He smashed the extra in the head with his sword, a sword that was very real and very heavy. The force of the blow was so severe that it left a dent in the extra's helmet and a permanent scar on his head. Later that night, the same actor was relaxing in a tent with 44 others when Kinski fired 3 shots into their midst. According to the extra's account, Kinski shot straight through the wall, striking one person. Fortunately, the injury was non-fatal, though it blew off the man's fingertip.
Hasste alle, war impulsiv, unberechenbar, halb wahnsinnig.
Amazingly, production continued on the movie as though the star of the film hadn't just committed attempted murder. But there was more drama to come. Things came to a head when Kinski threatened to quit the film. He loaded up everything he had onto a motorboat. Planning to take it back up the river to civilization, he was confronted by Herzog at the dock. They had so much left to film that completing the movie without Kinski would have been impossible. Kinski raved at Herzog, who stood by calmly. Finally, the director delivered a chilling threat. He said that he had a rifle back in camp, and that by the time Kinski reached the bend in the river, there would be 9 bullets in his head. Herzog ominously added that only the 9th would be fired by himself. This convinced Kinski to stay and finish the movie. Aguirre was a huge success internationally for both the director and the actor. It was also far from the last time they would work together, and far from the last time someone would threaten to kill Kinski. Kinski's stock went up a lot after Aguirre's success. However, the actor wasn't interested in acclaim as much as he was in money. His choice of roles would often come down to who offered him the most money. Many high-profile directors, such as Steven Spielberg, offered Kinski parts in their latest films. However, he drove them away by demanding exorbitant fees. Those parts he did take would range from low-budget horrors like Creature to foreign crime films like Death of a Corrupt Man. He would also rarely work with the same director twice. Kinski did end up working with Herzog a second and third time in 1979, first making the drama film Wojciech. After that movie, Herzog now had the opportunity to remake one of the most formative works of horror ever made, Nosferatu the Vampyre. Kinski, of course, played the titular vampire, this time actually named Count Dracula.
You must excuse my rude entrance. I'm Count Dracula.
Filmed in Germany, the movie is remembered as one of the few remakes that surpassed the original. Kinski was still a menace on set. However, with only a crew of 16, there were less people to scream at. But he did get along with one person in particular. The young makeup artist who created his vampiric look had to spend hours applying the teeth and prosthetics. Kinski never complained once, and she remembered their time together fondly. Herzog then went on to make another jungle film with Kinski, and this one would see the two nearly kill each other. Fitzcarraldo told the story of an opera-obsessed colonialist in South America.
I want my opera house! I want the opera house!
He wants to finance building a new opera house by exploiting the booming rubber trade. This involves, somehow, dragging a massive riverboat over a mountain. To film this, Herzog actually dragged a steamship over a mountain.
It works! It works!
He wasn't big on special effects work, preferring a more practical style. While filming these scenes, Herzog employed hundreds of local natives as extras. They often had a front row seat to Kinski's most brutal tirades. They watched him scream about everything, often just because he had a constant need to be the center of attention. Herzog himself remembers Kinski throwing tantrums in the middle of medical emergencies and even a plane crash. Herzog had a steel will and would generally remain calm during these outbursts. The natives eventually confronted Herzog about Kinski's behavior. Because their culture valued calm, fortitude, and speaking softly, they were revolted by the German actor's temper. They also told Herzog that they were afraid, but not of who you think. Again, according to the director, Kinski wasn't the one they feared, but rather Herzog himself. It was his ability to remain calm and emotionless during Kinski's tirades that frightened them. They were genuinely worried that Herzog would be the one to really lose it one day and kill Kinski himself. So they offered a solution. They would kill Kinski for him. That's right, Kinski so infuriated an entire culture that they collectively wanted to kill him. Herzog quickly declined the offer, telling the tribal leaders that he still needed Kinski to finish the movie. They agreed, and the movie was eventually completed. Kinski hadn't even been the first choice for the part, as the previous actor had to drop out due to illness. Despite this, Fitzcarraldo would be the role that would most define Kinski's career. But it was far from his last, and another production saw yet another threat on Kinski's life. This time it was under a different director, for a very different kind of film from Herzog's works. Crawlspace was a sleazy, low-budget horror film from Charles Band's Empire Pictures. It starred Kinski as the son of a Nazi scientist who terrorizes the female residents of an apartment building. The 1986 film was written and directed by David Schmoller, who had a lot riding on the production. It was his choice to hire Kinski, who he had admired in Herzog's films. He was aware of Kinski's reputation, but when he called previous directors Kinski had worked with, they had all vouched for his professionalism. For some reason, they were lying, and Schmoller would soon learn the truth. When Kinski arrived on set, he threw a fit about the film's wardrobe. He trashed the costumes and stormed out. The director would later learn that he went to all the most expensive clothing boutiques, purchased an entire wardrobe, and then billed it to the production. When shooting fully began, every scene with Kinski was torturous. He would throw daily tantrums, screaming to the point of incoherence. He would physically assault other actors and members of the crew. He would refuse to do second takes, even if a line had been flubbed. It got to the point where Schmoller was having panic attacks on his way to set every day. He begged the film's producers to fire and replace Kinski, but they refused. It was his star power that they were selling the movie on, and they needed him to finish it. Kinski continued to make production impossible, refusing to respond to words like action, cut, or even his own name. At one point, as Schmoller remembered in his short film Please Kill Mr. Kinski, he was offered a choice. It was a similar choice Herzog had been offered in the Amazon jungle. One of Crawlspace's producers was Italian and had some less than savory connections. According to Schmoller, this producer suggested that he could have Kinski dispatched by a professional, and then they could just collect the insurance on the failed production. Schmoller declined, but word leaked out to the crew. During Kinski's daily tirades, the director recalled several crew members whispering to him the same phrase over and over: "Please kill Mr. Kinski." Kinski's final role was in the 1989 film Paganini. This had long been a passion project for the actor, and would finally see him working with a director he loved, himself. Kinski passed away in 1991 from a heart attack, and was mourned by cinephiles everywhere. Those who actually knew him, however, were more conflicted about his death, with only one of his 3 children attending the funeral. During his time, Kinski had physically and mentally assaulted both his male and female co-workers, thrown productions into turmoil, caused serious bodily harm, and touted his own inflated ego over those in his path. There was, however, something undeniably magnetic about his performances, and despite his behavior, he managed to deliver some of the greatest scenes in cinematic history. Are you shocked by Kinski's behavior? And what do you think of his influence on film history? Leave a comment below and like and subscribe for more great videos from Cinema Snob. Thanks for watching.